Adam Taxon here, speaking with Charles Heller, who is a self-defense civil rights activist based in Arizona. He is co-founder, along with three others, of the Arizona Citizens Defense League, which is on the web at azcdl.org. And it's an organization which has twice in the last few years been recognized as the most successful grassroots civil rights self-defense activism lobby in the United States. Charles Heller is involved, as I am, with Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, which is on Facebook and on the web at jpfo.org. He is state certified to teach the use of firearms and the laws of self-defense for the CCW permit course. He is also a talk show host in Tucson with three programs, which are the Free Market Swap Shop. There's also Liberty Watch, which is about government remaining servant, not master, and there's also America Armed and Free, which is about things with a muzzle or a blade. Before I get to Charles Heller, let's just review. Today is Monday, August 6th, 2012, and yesterday, of course, featured a massacre at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin in the Milwaukee suburb of Oak Creek. The culprit has now been identified. He is Wade M. Page, who is not only a white male, but ex-Army and active in white supremacist groups, and obviously this is a dream assailant for Barack Obama, who's now calling for, quote, soul searching. It's a dream suspect for the gun grabbers and also for people who get rich off of things like this, like Morris Dees of the so-called Southern Poverty Law Center, who will inevitably exploit this for all that it's worth. Charles, welcome, and since this is still a developing story, let's talk about some lessons to draw from yesterday's tragic events. Let's keep it to that. Let's talk about, first of all, self-sufficiency and preparedness for one's organization or group.
Thank you for having me on, Adam. Self-sufficiency is such an important topic. It starts with awareness. One of the things we teach in the concealed weapons class is the four mental states that Colonel Cooper codified. White, the mental state of liquid paper, unawareness. Yellow, a relaxed state of alertness, a willingness to believe that something that looks like it's going wrong is actually going wrong. Orange, a specific condition or threat or challenge or danger. And red being either running away or fighting for your life. And part of it is teaching that awareness to the vast majority of your people. The second thing, once you're aware of it, because Cooper said there's no great honor in winning a fight that could have been avoided.
Right.
And if you could see it coming and avoid it, all the better. If it's not avoidable and you see it coming, you're at least better prepared to deal with it. That's number one. Number two is having the tools to deal with it, whatever those tools might happen to be. I mean, if you're in New Jersey, probably the best you're going to do is a semi-automatic baseball bat, maybe not a semi-automatic one at that. But if you're in states where, if you're in a free country like Arizona or most of the country where you can either open carry or with or without a permit, or you can get a concealed carry permit or a license of some type, then having people who are designated as your security. And the other thing is having a plan, knowing what you're going to do. If, Colonel Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman points out that in the last 50 years, no child has died in a school fire. And the reason is because they have firefighting equipment and they have fire drills. Why shouldn't ballistic safety be the same?
True. Well, let's talk about this in practical terms. First of all, how do you think, Wisconsin is not New Jersey or California, first of all, I want to emphasize that.
Right.
But there is the surprise factor, and there are going to be a few casualties, but how could things have been different yesterday if the Sikhs, who are also often a very prepared group of people, and this is not a Reformed synagogue we're talking about, how could things have been differently if they had had a plan?
Well, the thing is, it might be a Reformed synagogue, but the yarmulkes have swelled.
Right.
I'm sorry. Can only stay serious in short bursts. What are some of the things that the individual congregations can do?
Well, specifically yesterday, looking at yesterday's event, what if they had been better prepared, what could have happened? There would have been someone armed there, first of all.
First of all, number one, before even someone armed, what you ought to have is a designated lookout. You ought to use the periscope concept. When submarines traveled on the surface back in the diesel submarine era, they had three hoops on the top, and as high up as you could get people, they had guys scanning with binoculars. The same concept, obviously not with binoculars, but from a point where you can view your entire premises, there ought to be people that are on the lookout. Number one. Number two, they ought to have a signaling device, and there ought to be a signal, be it a whistle, be it something else, that if that's blown, that there's that if that signal goes off, maybe it's an electronic device like a key fob type thing tied into the building's alarm system, and it sets off a certain alarm so people know that there's a threat in the building. Next is people want to know what to do if there's if that threat, if they hear that siren, what to do. And last of all, as a final backup, because your defense needs to be in depth. You know, if every problem, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem will look like a nail.
Right.
You know, if all you have is a hammer and you got screws, you don't want to countersink your screws. You want to tighten them down. So the firearms will go absolute last resort. Mm-hmm. But if it's necessary, like it was in Arvado, Colorado in 2007, when Gina Som took out a much better armed assailant, then that's what you need to do, and there need to be designated people to do that.
Right, and obviously this assailant was someone who looked different from the people in the building. I mean, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to say, wait a minute, what is he doing here? Or at least have someone outside asking, at least being a first defense.
Right. You know, may I help you, sir? And that person may get shot.
Right.
But if that person gets shot and they lock the doors, then only one person gets shot, not multiples. And also, because the doors are locked and you've made it much more difficult for him to commit an assault, he's now kind of orphaned. He's now left standing there having shot somebody with a gun in his hand, and people are looking because they hear that noise and they look. Now he's running instead of shooting.
And is there any evidence that anyone in the congregation was armed? And this is a state where it would have been possible to do so. I have not heard that yet. That there was.
I'm too far removed from it in Arizona to have heard any part of that story, and I don't want to comment. I don't want to. I'm not. Although I am a member of the media, I don't want to comment on things I don't know about.
Fair enough. But I think one could guess that if one were in Arizona, or for that matter, other constitutional carries, states like Alaska, Wyoming, and Vermont is the other one, someone probably would have been armed, I'm guessing.
I got to tell you lovingly, Adam, that might not be the case.
Right.
Even though it would be legal, a lot of times people don't carry. And I'll give you an example of somebody who could have and might have saved some lives, but unfortunately died because he wasn't armed. And that's Judge John Roll here in Tucson in January 8th of 2011. And that is when at the unfortunate incident where Congresswoman Giffords was so terribly wounded. And Judge Roll was an accomplished shooter. He shot regularly at one of the local ranges here in Tucson. He was very good with a .45 and owned several, some very nice ones, and was coming from his Catholic church and didn't believe in carrying in church. And that's when he went straight from the church to visit Congresswoman Giffords.
Sure.
So I think it would have been a different day if either Judge Roll wasn't coming from church or he had a different doctrine about where to go armed.
Yeah, of course, church might be a place, all the more reason, especially in light of yesterday's events, that one should go armed.
I agree. I agree fully with you, but the problem is that you and I, as decent people, have a mindset that maybe we should take it off to go there. I wouldn't, or synagogue in my case, but I wouldn't. And frankly, if my synagogue made my gun fusillah non grata, I'd make myself persona non grata in that synagogue. I pray for them.
Finally, let me just ask you if you have any words about the hero that's emerged from this story, and that's police officer Lieutenant Brian Murphy.
Murphy. Well, he shows what happens when somebody stands up to evil. He got hurt very badly. He's probably going to survive. He's most assuredly going to survive. Took 8 hits and kept fighting. And that tells you something. Handguns are very rarely, only about 15% of the time are they lethal. And so if you do get hurt by one, keep in the fight. Decide in advance you're going to be one of the 85% who survive. And keep fighting. Just because you get injured, even though you're shot, doesn't mean you have to stop fighting. You keep on going until there's nothing left, especially nothing left to the opponent. Right? You take all the fear and all the everything else, you pile it into one emotion, stick it into an emotional funnel, and point it right at the bad guy and let him have it with everything you got till he's no longer a threat.
Any preliminary thoughts about how the anti-Second Amendment crowd is going to try to exploit it, or is it just too early to say anything on this?
No, it's plan A. Dance in the blood of the victims. Talk about how awful it is. Vilify people who won't have gun laws as if gun laws would change anything.
Right, and Chicago.
But it just generally hype the emotion of it without looking at any of the reason of it. It's standard tactic of the left. It's all emotion, no reason. All style, no substance.
Any final thoughts?
The interesting thing about it is that people are beginning to get it.
Right.
That wouldn't work. And what you're seeing now, all over the country, you're seeing surges in up 23 to 25% surges in applications for CCW permits and training. And people who traditionally, the soccer mom kind of people, who traditionally were not gun people, are now going to ranges and getting training. I think it's that component of it, to me, makes a lot of sense. It's people being rational. I'm motivated by reason. That reason is what makes me emotional.
Right.
And I love seeing that people are beginning to apply reason to this. The other thing is that people have to understand that you're on your own. I call it yo-yo and yo-yor. You're on your own, you own your own result. There's no requirement for police to protect you. None. There is no law that requires it. There's no court that requires it. What the police do they're reactive. Remember, the police are the second responders. You're the first responder. And when seconds count, the police are only minutes away.
Charles, let me just give the websites for the groups in which you're involved. That's Arizona Citizens Defense League, azcdl.org, and also Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, which I'm also involved with, and that's on the web at jpfo.org. Any final thoughts, Charles?
Yeah. If you're in a place that doesn't allow firearms or even pepper mace or some other form or an ASP baton, consider carrying a cane. A cane is something that cannot be prohibited. You can carry it on an airliner. It's something to have in your hand to swing. And also a bright tactical flashlight. A tactical flashlight in that theater in Colorado could have temporarily blinded the shooter long enough for a couple people to tackle him, even if they weren't armed. And it is a phenomenal. There's a lot of great companies. There's Streamlight. There's 100 companies making 4.7s. All kinds of flashlight companies out there. Even LED lenser. Leatherman has now got a line of flashlights. And this is something you can carry on an airliner with you. You could use it. Some of them have a bright strobe feature that can really disorient somebody long enough to get inside their defensive envelope and take them out. And it doesn't require a permit.
Charles, thanks for your time today.